So in this video, we're going to talk about using the SolidDNA framework for SolidWorks. We've already got some videos on it, but specifically what I want to do in this video now is to show you how to make use of the new NuGet package. So in previous examples, we've had to download the source code from github.com/AngelSix/SolidWorks-API. And then there's examples in tutorials that we've done so far, and these end up having to reference the entire source code here, the CS proj, which is obviously, it's good in some ways, but other ways you want to just get started quick and you don't want to have to mess with the source code. So I've pushed a NuGet package live, so we can make use of that. So I'm just going to show you now quickly how to start a new project up that will reference the NuGet package and just do, the most basic thing. It'll do nothing else other than reference that NuGet package and display a startup message. So we're going to go ahead and create a new class library, and this one is here. We'll just call it SolidDNA NuGet, I guess. Yeah, I'll just call it that. Then we're going to target framework 4.7.1, so make sure that's installed, which if you've got the latest Windows, it comes by default. And create the new project. Make that smaller. And then the first thing we're going to do is to right click on the project and properties, and then assembly info and make com visible. So that's this here. Let's make assembly com visible there. So you want to make sure that's checked. Click OK. And then to debug, go to Start External Program, Browse, and then go to C Drive, Program Files, SolidWorks, and then SLDworks.exe. So that will effectively start SolidWorks when we press F5, which is what we want. So that's all you need to do on your project settings. So now in here, right click on your project and unload project, and then right click again and edit CS proj. And then what you need to do in here, this is because it's not quite ready yet, they don't support this reference style yet by default, is in the first property group. So just chuck it inside the property group section here, and you want to just type in open brackets restore project style close brackets, and that'll then also put you the ending tag on, and then package reference. So you want to type in specifically, this line that I've just pasted here. And what this does is it makes use of NuGet package references in a new style, which is a package reference style. So that will allow it to work correctly right now. It will become standard in hopefully another few months, so that will be part of the CS proj. And I'll also make a template, so you can just do file new project and there'll be a SolidDNA template soon, so you don't even have to do this step. But basically that's one of the things we have to do right now, and the reason for that is now when we right click on references and manage NuGet packages, go to browse and type I think it's AngelSix.SolidDNA. Yeah, so just type AngelSix and you'll see we've got one here. Somehow 200 and odd people have already managed to download this, even though I've not advertised it yet. So we've got this one here. So if we just click install on AngelSix.SolidDNA and then accept, and you should notice it goes blue. It's important it goes blue. If instead you get a load of references being added in here, then you either haven't added the correct name in the CS proj, or just open and close Visual Studio to make sure, and start again to make sure you get this blue reference, and that will make sure that the packages get restored correctly. And then the last thing you want to do in terms of messing with this before code is you obviously need to reference the SolidWorks interop DLLs. So they are available again if you download the repo right now. They're in references, and we're using the SolidWorks 2018 ones. So it doesn't matter if you're not using SolidWorks 2018, you can reference these and it's backwards compatible. And SolidDNA right now references these, so you must reference these specific DLLs. If you've got SolidWorks installed, you can just go ahead and grab them yourself. So you can go to C Drive, Program Files, SolidWorks, and then in here, you go down to, keep going, they're all here. So you've got a bunch of here, the SolidWorks.interop files. Those files are these exact files here. So we can add references to these, and I've also got the repository cloned, obviously, because it's my source code. So I've got the references here, 2018. So I'm just going to go right-click references, add reference, browse, and then I'm going to paste in the location of them. I'm just going to add them all, click OK. And then you'll see here now it'll add a bunch of references. Last important step is to select them all, right-click and properties. And then what you're looking for is specifically this embed interop types needs to be set to false. So double click the interop types and it sets to false. And now all of these have been set to false, which is important. And again, once we get a project reference, you won't need to do any of that. So Control Shift and build and just make sure it builds successfully, which it does, because again, if you look down here, it says built successfully. So now we have the project set up, the interop files in, everything ready to go. Now it's time to actually write the SolidDNA add-in. So I'm going to press Ctrl R and G to remove all the unused namespaces. So all these that were grey here. I press Ctrl R for Romeo, G for Golf. It removes, those. And then I'm going to now make this first class be my add-in integration. Do a colon and then type add-in integration. Control and dot on the keyboard, so period, and then press enter. And that'll add the using AngelSix.SolidDNA namespace. And now you can see it's complaining that we haven't implemented the interface. So again, control dot, press enter to implement abstract classes. And you can see it's added a bunch of methods for us. Just delete all of the throw new exceptions. And let me just comment this class up. So this will be register as a SolidWorks add-in. Then we have specific application startup code, and I'll explain all this afterwards. And then we have the steps to take before, this one is configuring these services. 1 second, come back to that, do it in order. So preload plugins, this is steps to take before any add-in loads, in the sense of rather any plugin, not add-in, like our SolidDNA plugins loading. Then we have the pre-connect to SolidWorks, which funnily enough is fired after that. And that is basically you use this to do early initialization and any configuration. And I've made a note of specific ones. So of any configuration of the plugin integration class properties as a good example, such as the plugin integration dot use detached app domain. So this is rarely used, and by default you won't use it. But again, if you want to set up something in advance of the whole thing starting up, if you will, such as being able to run a detached app domain, this is the way to do it. I'll do a big comment up here explaining everything. I'll just paste in the notes I've made in a minute, when I'm just typing these specific ones in. So this is now the dependency injection. It uses the AngelSix.DNA framework inside of the DNA web. So we've got a whole, you don't need an inject or anything like that. Now you've actually got dependency injection built into this directly. So called when the dependency injection is being set up. And this is the framework construction. This is something I've made and this is open source. So we just go to github.com/AngelSix/DNA-framework. You'll get the source code to all of this as well. And then in here, I've done an example. So let me just copy and paste my example if you were to add something. So basically the description here, you can add a service. So you need to put in using Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection here because it doesn't get added automatically. And then now you could do construction.services.add, and now you can do like add scoped And if you have a new class, you could just do, say you wanted a singleton, you do add singleton and new, and then my class. Say you wanted to chuck this actual add-in integration class into dependency injection, you could do that way. I believe you could just also do this and pass the class itself in. So then you could actually pull this exact class from dependency injection anywhere else in your code at any point from anywhere by just doing dna.framework.service and then specifying the class type, and that would get you, var my add-in, like so. That would actually get you this add-in. So it's just basic dependency injection stuff. You don't need to understand any of that to do any work, but if you know what dependency injection is and you're wondering how to use it in this, that's a kind of brief overview. So we haven't actually done any work here as such yet. We've just done my integration and overridden this class and implemented blank functions, and I've just chucked a load of comments on. And this should be familiar with everyone that's already done the SolidDNA add-ins already. So there's nothing new here. So that will get us registered as an add-in. So now we want to register the plugin. So SolidDNA works on plugins. This is the add-in to SolidWorks itself, and now SolidDNA will load any plugins, SolidDNA plugins that we find. So we make a plugin now, and we'll just call it my SolidDNA plugin. Plugin, solid plugin, and this is registers as a SolidDNA plugin to be loaded by our add-in integration class when the SolidWorks add-in, getting a bit long actually, when the SolidWorks add-in gets loaded. We can have multiple plugins in a single add-in. That's kind of a note. And then same again here, just click on here, control and dot, and then enter for implement abstract class. That'll chuck in all the defaults again. Then we'll just tidy this up. We will wrap this in a region. This is public properties. And again, this is all just for code cleanliness. It doesn't impact the code in terms of if you wanted to not have to do this. I just highly recommend keeping your code clean. So this is my add-in description. And this I want to also improve, because right now, in order for how it works right now, the add-in title and description to be dynamic have been set in the first plugin that gets loaded dynamically. Really, I want it in the add-in integration, because you can have multiple plugins, but you can only have one add-in, and you can only have one add-in title. So long story short, this is in here for now. You typically only make one plugin, so for now, nothing really matters. But if you're going to make multiple plugins, make sure all the others are just a blank string or null, like so, and then only specify your real add-in title and description once in one of the plugins, but I'll fix that in a future version of SolidDNA. Oops, that's my add-in title. That's my add-in description. So in here, again, fill them in with whatever you like. This is the thing that shows up in SolidWorks in the add-in menu. Description. So that can now be cleaned up like that. And then this can be a region for connect to SolidWorks. And now in here we have the basics of this should run when our add-in runs, and we can do something with it. So the simplest thing we can do is do application, and we don't have it on there. So application is if we do up here using static AngelSix.SolidDNA .SolidWorks environment, and now we can just type in application directly, and we get access to the SolidWorks application. So this is, you could not type this up here. You could just delete the static, but then you'd have to type every time you wanted to access it AngelSix.SolidDNA.SolidWorks environment.application something, which is nasty, looks awful. So instead of we put a using static up the top, we can now just type anywhere in this class application dot, and now we can just do show message box, nice and simple. Our first SolidDNA, or should I do it like so? That looks better. SolidDNA Add-In. How easy was that? So that is our message. We need to specify an icon box type, so information. And that's really it. That's our add-in. So Control Shift and B, make sure it builds, which again shows built successful down there. And now what I will do before we run this, let me just paste my entire notes and talk through them so you kind of understand what's gone on here, because that's kind of also important to give people more insight into the SolidDNA. I'm just going to paste at the top here, scroll up, and then we'll just read through this. So basically, this is going to be in a template, so I've made it nice and neat and clean looking and describing what it is. So if you already know, SolidDNA is a modern framework designed to make developing SolidWorks add-ins easier. There'll be a template soon, so that's why I'm saying with this template you're ready to go. And then the examples here linked to the GitHub repo. So we've now built this class, and if you imagine this class would have already been built when it's in the template, that's why it's kind of just not telling you what we've just done. It's not saying you need to do this, that, the other, because we've already done it. One thing I will just do is rename class 1 to SolidWorks integration, or SolidDNA integration. So now the first step we need to do at this point is to register the add-in DLL, and that's in order to get it to load in SolidWorks. So to get your DLL to run inside of SolidWorks, I'm sure you know you need to register the DLL. I've added again in, or I will add now, let's just chuck this in and then I'll make this a template. Let me just go to my existing one, get some references and resources, paste them into this one we've made. So here's the one we're working in right now. What I'm going to do is paste these in, so this will come as part of the project. They're the references for the SolidWorks, and then we're going to get a folder called resources. So when you start a new project in SolidDNA project, that project should hopefully, if I can get it working right, have a resources folder then that's got the add-in installer. That's again the open source tool I made. So all I'll just do is double click that, and then it will pop up with this add-in installer. Now what we need to do is, if we again right click on our project and go open folder, go to bin, and then we're in debug at the minute. So again, notice what you're in up here, you're in debug. So that's the one we want to be in. So we go to debug, and then it's the name of the solution, which is SolidDNA NuGet. So you look for the DLL called SolidDNA NuGet.dll. You can hold shift and right click, and again that will bring up, I can't show the right click menu, I don't think. No, so I can't kind of zoom in on the right click menu. But basically there is, if you hold shift when you right click, you'll get copy as path here. So copy that, go to the add-in tool, you can paste it into here, but then all you have to do is delete the quotes that are at the end and beginning of the string. So delete that one, press home, and then delete the one that's at the start as well. So it's just the path in there. I think it might work actually. Let's leave it in and see if it works. No, so you have to remove the quotes. Click install, and then it should say successfully registered. If not, double check everything you've done, because so long as, really, so long as you have your application assembly info set to COM visible, your reference links to Solid interop, all the SolidWorks interrupts set to false, and your add-in integration in. Other than that, if those three things are done, you should never fail to install. So hopefully that's installed and you get the register successful. So we've done this part basically. Note you only need to register once when you're in that location. So as long as we don't rename or move this project, we don't need to keep redoing that bit. So now it's time to debug the code. The project's already been set up because we've just done this, so that you can press F5 to start SolidWorks. This is done in the project properties debug start external program. So again, once you download the template or start a new template, we'll default it to this exact path. And if your SolidWorks is installed in a different location, then simply change it as it says here. And then it's going to talk about the startup flow. So what I say here is that when your SolidWorks add-in loads, SolidWorks first calls the connector SolidWorks inside of this add-in integration, which is the source code to SolidDNA. So it calls, firstly, this call, this exact one here. And this is the one that gets called. And you don't need to worry about that. That's more for information purposes. So it's going to call that. And then that method will fire in this order. Pre-connect to SolidWorks, then configure services, then preload, and then application start, and then connected. So you've got those in here. You can see them happening. And a few of these are events. So the very first thing called is pre-connect to SolidWorks. So that would be this call here. And then you have events. So if there's something not in here, then configure services we have there. Preload plugins is there. Application startups there, and then connected to SolidWorks. So we don't have a connected to SolidWorks in here, in this one. So do we have an event? Yes, we do. So in pre-connect to SolidWorks, you can then hook into connected to SolidWorks and make a function to, if you wanted to do something in the add-in specifically when you connect it to SolidWorks, now you can do your code in here. But typically you don't do that in the add-in side. You do it then in your plugin sides, which is then got its function. So that's all there is to talk about it, really. That's how it's structured and how it works. So that's the add-in. So all that's left now, we should just press F5, and this should compile, build, run SolidWorks, and hopefully pop up with our little message that our first SolidDNA add-in. And it should also be, if we breakpoint quickly, if we were quick enough there, this should load and turn red, this breakpoint, which it has now, so we know we're loaded in. And now we've hit the breakpoint, because you can see we've got a yellow arrow and it's flashing. So now if we press F5 to simply step over, you can see now this is from SolidWorks itself, our first DNA. And then it's loaded. And then if we went to Tools, Add-ins, and then you can see here, zoom in on that, you can see there, my add-in tile. And if I just hover over so you can see the descriptions, you can see also the location of where that is. So this is our add-in. And it thinks it took 12 seconds to load because we were debugging, but it doesn't take that long. So that's it. That's the start of now using SolidDNA, but using specifically the NuGet reference now. So your entire SolidWorks add-in is this one class. And to be honest, it's really one line of code where you need it and a bunch of comments. And all of this I'll now wrap into a project template so that next you can just do File, New, Project. And then in here, you will have something that says SolidDNA. You can click that and start a new blank one, and you'll get this exact project. Until then, I'll zip this project up, or rather not zip it up, I'll put it in the GitHub SolidWorks API repository, so you can just access it that way for now. Or you can watch this video and type it. So hopefully this video was useful. Now you can make use of the NuGet reference instead of the source code, and it should be much simpler and cleaner for your project. Any comments, leave them in the video as always. And if you want to support what I do have a Patreon page, patreon.com/AngelSix. And you can donate to me there if you want to support what I'm doing. So hopefully that was useful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.